Hey guys, Bix Weir, road.com. We have a great guy from down in Australia, John Adams, who has been kicking ass on the bankers. Thank God. Thank God we have someone down under looking after us. The Perth Mint has been secretly doing all kinds of things, and he's hot on their trail. Actually, it's not even just Australia anymore. It's all these cozy relationships between bankers, refiners, and the mints, and even the mining companies. They are all in, not all of them, but a lot of them are colluding with each other to suppress the price of the asset that they're supposed to be selling and supposed to be supporting. John, thank you for coming on. How's it going down under?
Thank you, Bix. Look, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun down here chasing the Perth Mint. It's been a comical of errors over the last 3 weeks. Richard Hayes, every time he opens up his mouth, he's freaking out his customers, and more and more people are dumping their synthetic products and sort of converting over to physical. But before we get into this, I just want to say I've been following you for like 6 years, and look, every time I wake up in the morning in Australia, I'm looking at the YouTube channels, who's put out a video. You usually put up one about silver, and I've enjoyed listening to your content, and you definitely have been a very good tutor to me.
Well, thank you so much. And I, truthfully, I dropped the ball on the Perth Mint a few years back. I thought we had beaten that little lion or whatever you wanted to call it back then, and then they resurrected this program in 2016. You mentioned Richard Hayes. Just so everybody knows, Richard Hayes is the CEO of the Perth Mint. He's also a Rothschild banker previously, and I think currently with Goldcorp being, I think it's being still owned partially by the Rothschilds, if not fully by the Rothschilds. So just keep that in mind. We're going to throw out some names. I wanted to start with kind of how you got turned on to what was going on with the Perth Mint, what you call synthetic products. I love that name for them. What do we call it in America? I think we call it paper gold, and all kinds of ridiculousness. Anything that is not the real thing is a joke, in my opinion. I think it was FT came out a couple of years back and said the silver market is a $5 trillion annual market. And I'm like, yeah, it is if you count every single little swaption and lease contract and foul game that they play. Otherwise, it's a tiny market. So what got you kind of sniffing around the Perth Mint?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of your audience, so now, I mean, I'm a professional economist, and I've had a very long and interesting career here in Australia. I've worked in federal politics. I've been an economic advisor to a senator, and I've been a bureaucrat, and I've worked for a big four accounting firm. So I've done the whole sort of thing. And I got started on this journey in about 2015, 16, when, I mean, so just if your American audience isn't aware, Australia has the biggest debt bubble in our history in household debt. At the same time, we've got the biggest debt bubble in the history of the world. And, obviously before the GFC, there was a lot of Americans heavily leveraged into real estate. Well, Australia has taken over in terms of, relative to Americans. So if you thought things were bad before 2008 with real estate in America, you don't know what a real debt bubble is, a household debt bubble. So real estate off this in this country is off the charts in valuations, and debt's a huge thing. So I started the journey of writing a whole host of mainstream articles about the debt bubble and financial risk, economic risk, and wrote a series. If people look me up on Google and say John Adams Economic Armageddon, you're going to find a range of articles I wrote for the mainstream media. And then I started wanting to do what I'm doing now, which is effectively full-time commentating, researching, causing problems for the Perth Mint, etc. And so, I did a number of things. I've got a YouTube channel that I do with my co-host Martin North. It's called In the Interest of the People, and we've done a number of recent silver shows, but we've done all sorts of things on that channel, from economics to politics and gold and financial risk, etc. But the other thing I did was, I started buying silver in 2017, thinking about, okay, I want to actually own some real wealth, and I actually want to have some real money. And then I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to do this full time, I need to actually generate income to support my family. And I reached out to, so I live in New South Wales, in the most populous state in Australia. So I live just south of Sydney, and I found a bullion company in South Australia, so in another state, and they were doing some really interesting stuff, and they caught my attention. And I went down there, and I met the ownership, and they were looking for a chief economist, and I became, obviously I'm a professional economist, and we were talking the same sort of language. So I joined them in July of 2018, and since then, coming on 3 years, I've been working not only just doing economic analysis, and obviously learning about gold and silver market manipulation, but I've been talking to a whole host of Australians about gold and silver, and about acquiring real money as part of their portfolio. So I approached the gold and silver market really from the macroeconomic point of view, the history of money, the sort of Mike Maloney sort of thing, looking at what happens when you have a fiat currency system. You print so much money, and then the value of the currency goes down, and then people revert back to gold and silver. So that's how I sort of was thinking about gold and silver back, say, 2015, 16, 17. But one of the people that really started sort of catching my attention, I mean, there was you, but then one of the other people was actually Bill Murphy. So Bill Murphy, I remember listening to him on a whole host of channels from GATA, and he said, economic conditions don't matter. All that matters is this manipulation scheme going to end? And obviously I started to think, well, if I'm working in the industry, I better actually understand what is actually happening in terms of this pricing structure and how it actually works and who's actually involved. And I think you do a great job to explain elements of the system. I just did a podcast this morning with Todd Bodrovic and Craig Hemke. And I mean, one thing that Craig taught me as I've followed his work is we're not just talking about the COMEX and the CFTC. We're not just talking about a few banks on Wall Street or in London. We're talking about an international syndicate. And that international syndicate, like you rightly have said, and I think just as we started this conversation, and even your video today where you put out what it might tweet about these Chinese bars, we're talking about banks, central banks, governments, treasuries, mining companies, refiners, and there's a global network of people who pretend that everything's fine, and the price is the fair price, and yet that isn't the case. And one of the things that I have come to learn, particularly in what's unique to the Australian market, is the two biggest players, which is Perth Mint, and there's another company called ABC Bullion, which is Australia's largest bullion refiner and retail dealership. And both of these have been in the market for a very, very long time. Both of them offer the market these, what I call synthetic products, unallocated, pool allocated products. And obviously with the Perth Mint, prior to December of last year, they also had an ETF, which they sold off to Goldman Sachs. So as I've been talking to Australian investors and customers over the last few years, I've come to learn that people have been putting their money in this stuff, and they didn't actually understand what they were doing. So last year on my website, so I have my own website, adamseconomics.com, and that has my full body of work, which is freely available for anyone to read my articles. I wrote an article called Beware of Synthetic Gold and Silver Products, and I actually explained what's the difference between owning a physical bar of gold or physical bar of silver versus unallocated and pool allocated. And that's where a number of people started to get, they read the article and they started asking me questions, and we're not talking small clients. I mean, I had someone I just helped close a multi-million-dollar deal who went from unallocated at the Perth Mint to physical, and it came across to us. Well, he read my article last year and he sent me an email, and we had a discussion, and I don't think he fully understood the difference between owning a bar or a coin that you have physical legal title over versus a promissory note, a promise to give you cash based on the changes in the market price, or the promise to give you physical gold and silver. So that's where I sort of came up with this idea of synthetic gold and silver. And so what, one of the things, Bex, is I put out an article last year, and then I've just done a recent video on my YouTube channel, and it's called George Soros and the Silver Moonshot. And the way I think about The silver market in particular it's a price ceiling below equilibrium. And what that means is that well, a couple of things. One is one of the questions I got asked this morning is, why would you invest in a rigged market? Well, kind of like what happened with George Soros. George Soros in 1992, when he broke the Bank of England, the Bank of England set a price floor above equilibrium for the exchange rate between the pound and the Deutschmark, and he was able to break it by placing a $10 billion bet, and he made a $1 billion profit in 4 weeks. And so when I look at this price ceiling, and the price ceiling is probably at this stage $30 US an ounce, if the price ceiling was to break, well then, and we really had a sort of a run at COMEX, the price would go to equilibrium. And the equilibrium, I mean, I've heard you, I think Cliff High said $600 an ounce. Other people have said, I think you've said $100,000 an ounce in one show. And when I heard you say that, I thought, wow, I mean, look, Bix is really getting me excited about that.
I did. I just want to say your beginnings are very similar to mine, although, I got in with GATA and Bill Murphy back in like 2000, right after they started GATA. And Chris Powell and him were, I mean, Bill was screaming and screaming. We thought it was the banks at the time. And then we figured out, oh my God, it's more than the banks. You got the government, the CFTC covering up for the banks. You've got the Treasury, you've got everybody's involved. And which, once you go down that rabbit hole, you do find out it's more than a syndicate. It is the way our world has been able to function for over 100 years. Otherwise, it would not have functioned. I mean, it goes back to early 1900s, 1913 even, the creation of the Fed in the U.S. And all these things had to be put together, had to be colluded together, had to be done in secret, so that the word didn't get out that everything's fake, and all these exchanges are fake, and all the derivatives they use to suppress the price. You call them synthetic. I'm in 2010, I spoke at the Silver Summit, and I was screaming about the derivatives on the price of silver. And I was screaming at everybody in the industry who was there, a lot of mining CEOs. I said, what are you people doing? Do you not care about the product? Do you not care about your industry? Why do you allow this to happen? Look at the amount of derivatives being traded versus the amount of the underlying product, and it was off the charts. It's just gotten worse. And I applaud you for digging in and fighting for your industry. And that's an amazing thing. I wasn't even in that industry, truthfully. I mean, I was working for a bank at the time in their mining leasing programs. I was helping leasing mining equipment to large companies all throughout the world. And I was like, this isn't my industry. I shouldn't have to fight this hard so that you guys can get a true fair market value for your asset. You need to fight this hard. And you did that. You were in the industry and you picked up the silver sword. And then you got guys like Richard Hayes, who's the CEO of one of the largest refiners and minting companies in the world. And oh, by the way, he doesn't want you to buy silver. He wants you to stay away from silver. As a matter of fact, if you have a keyboard in front of you, he call them what? Keyboard cowboys going after the price of silver. Well, if they're a hell of a lot smarter than the people behind the scenes in the industry, God bless the keyboard cowboys. God bless anybody who would fight for the right thing to happen in their industry. And the right thing is finding the true fair market value of any asset. Anything other than that is a criminal enterprise. It should be shut down. And that's why I do it. And I know that's why you do it too. We're fighting for, that's why I wore this shirt tonight. I'm fighting for the truth in all markets, no matter what the ramifications. And the ramifications are going to be unfathomable with silver and gold when they are freely traded, only because these criminals have held them down for so long. We don't know the price of gold. We don't know the price of silver. We don't know the amounts of either of those metals either, because they hide that as well. So yeah, I think you're doing a great job for your industry. And wow, can you tell us some of the things that have, like I read your Twitter posts and you're like, okay, we had another customer go in and here's what they hear. What are they saying now? You said that the CEO keeps saying things and contradicting themselves. I ran into the same problem when I was fighting the Perth Mint. What's he saying now? Is he saying, come get your 1,000-ounce bars of silver? We got plenty. And can people like throw the cash on the table? I think I heard an interview like that. Is that possible? Can you go to the mint, throw the cash on the table and walk away with 1,000-ounce bars?
Well, so pretty much. I mean, now here's the thing. So this whole Perth Mint situation blew up on the 20th of March, when I actually put out a tweet. And to be honest, I mean, I thought, I don't know, 100 people would look at it. And I said that I'm hearing horror story after horror story involving the Perth Mint. People can't convert from synthetic to physical, and the Perth Mint is in default. Well, lo and behold, that one tweet got picked up by Wall Street Silver and David Morgan and Craig Kempke and a whole, and Alistair McLeod and all these guys retweeted me. And then like more than 369,000 people saw it. And that tweet was the reason why Richard Hayes went on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and actually gave an interview. So before the 20th of March, there was definitely problems at the Perth Mint. So, and you probably heard me in some other interviews. So again, late February, once the silver squeeze started, I have a friend in Perth who went to the Perth Mint, was told in the retail shop, no silver for sale. And so basically she walked out empty-handed. Now, funny enough, the bullion dealership I work for is Gold Australia, which is based in South Australia. We are an approved and accredited distributor of the Perth Mint. We got told point blank, starting in the beginning of March, can't place an order of any size. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you have the money or not. You know, the distributors were not allowed to place orders, and then I've spoken to a wholesaler in the first fortnight of March. He went to the Perth Mint and says, I have the money. I want to buy a ton of 1,000 ounce bars. I want to ship the bars across the country, take it to another refiner, melt them down into retail product. Because the narrative of the Perth Mint in the first fortnight of March was, we have a manufacturing fabrication problem. We have 60 tons available for sale of what these 1,000 ounce bars. But the problem we have is we don't have the manufacturing capacity because we are so busy producing gold and producing a whole bunch of other stuff. So other people said, well, if you don't have the machinery, give us the silver and we'll take it somewhere else. And this wholesaler said, was told, we're not going to sell to you. So and then there was all sorts of stories of unallocated clients, pull allocated clients. Now, I think you did the right thing, and because after the Richard Hayes interview, I mean, it's clear to me. So the website clearly says, prior to them changing it, and we'll get into that in a second, it clearly said, if you have allocated, which is it's your legal property and they're just storing for you, you're going to get your property in 2 days. If you have unallocated or pull allocated, the website says deliverable in 10 days. So it was clear that we were getting signals before the 20th of March that there was no chance of getting delivery in 10 days. And that's why I used the word default. Because I didn't necessarily make the allegation that they didn't have the silver. I just said they're not delivering in the time frame, and that's where the default is. And then Richard Hayes goes on this interview and says, well, the 10 days doesn't actually mean that you're going to get silver in 10 days. It's the time we take to arrange quoting and arranging freight costs. And I'm thinking, give me a break. I mean, that is just complete BS. Because anyone in the industry knows that it doesn't take 10 days to do a quote and arrange freight costs.
What if you roll up in an armored truck and say, okay, I want my allocated pooled silver. You don't have to worry about freight. And I'm taking the 1,000 ounce bars. Why should there be any delay at all? That's a paperwork issue.
Yeah.
And
yeah, look, what I was going to say, Bix, so that's really interesting. So probably just over a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, they changed that. So in Australia, every financial product has to have what they call a product disclosure statement. They inserted a paragraph on page 16, and on that page, they basically included a paragraph, and they said, well, due to manufacturing or fabrication delays, we may take longer than 10 days. So because all these people say, well, why don't we just stand for delivery and take legal action? Well, they changed the documentation like SLV, and they got out of that. But then they made a number of strategic changes on their website. Now, I'll go into this. So on my YouTube channel, in the interest of the people, there's a show that I put up recently called The Australian Silver Crisis. We went into chapter and verse about these specific changes, and people can go watch that channel if they want to actually understand the minute detail. But one of the key changes they made, Bix, was they said, if you have unallocated or pool allocated, you cannot stand for immediate delivery. You have to go to allocated first. And then once you're allocated, then you can get your metal. Now, the problem with that is in the last 2.5 weeks, multiple people have tried to go to allocated, and they've been told you're not allowed to go to allocated. And so some of these people in the pool allocated product have more than 1,000 ounces. Now, so I should say, just to be fair, in the first week, say from the 22nd of March to the 26th of March, it was very difficult to get 1,000-ounce bars. On some days there was nothing available. On other days there were some available. But on I think on the Wednesday, I think this was the 24th of March, I get a phone call Wednesday night as I'm going for an evening walk, and one person, he had 10,000 unallocated ounces. He said, "Can I go to allocated?" "No, you're not allowed." "Can I go to pool allocated?" He said, they said, "Yes, you can. You pay 50 cents per ounce fabrication fee." So he said, "Okay, I'm going to convert 3,200 unallocated ounces to pool allocated." He paid the fabrication costs. And then he said to them, and then he got the document saying he's got now pool allocated. So he goes, "Okay, now I have 3,200 pool allocated ounces. Well, give me 3 1,000-ounce bars." "Well, no, we can't do that." "Well, why not?" Because the bars are organized into various categories in the warehouse, and you don't at this stage you don't classify for the categories. And it was some ridiculous excuse like that. And as soon as this guy told me this, I'm going, what does it actually mean? I mean, if this is supposed to be, so I just want to be clear for your audience, because I'm not sure how Kitco and some of the other guys in North America do this, but unallocated, according to the Perth Mint, is raw gold and silver that they use in their production, and you're buying a share of that raw silver or that raw gold. Pool allocated is, there is already, for example, in silver, there is a warehouse full of 1,000-ounce bars, which is backing the pool. And rather than you specifically buying an individual bar that's your legal property, you're buying a share of this pool. So if there's a warehouse full of 1,000-ounce bars, and someone says, "Okay, well, I've got 3,000 ounces in this product, just give me 3 bars." Well, I mean, look, it doesn't matter how the warehouse is organized. If you should be able to stand for delivery. Now, to be fair, I should say, in the private sector in Australia, there are various companies who do have a pool allocated product. And so far, particularly as there's been an absolute stampede in Australia where people are now going to physical or going to allocated. But with another company who's quite large, they have had a number of clients who have said, "Okay, I want to go from pool allocated straight to physical delivery. I want to walk into the office in 2 days and basically take my product." And that company has plenty of supply. So they have gone from pool allocated straight to physical delivery. And yet the Perth Mint is saying, well, you can't do that, even though there's supposed to be some sort of warehouse full of 1,000-ounce bars. Now, I would ask Richard Hayes, show us the bars. Go take a picture and actually post it. Last Friday, so Friday night, so obviously last Friday was Good Friday. So, and it's a public holiday in Australia, and I'm sure it's a public holiday in the United States as well. But on Friday night, so this was maybe 7, 8 o'clock Perth time, which was about 10, 11 at night here in Sydney. The Perth Mint put out a video on YouTube, and the video is like a 63-second promo of silver production of the Perth Mint. And I'm just thinking to myself, why would you put this out on a public holiday on a Friday night when this video says nothing about the concerns that your customers have? It was the most bizarre video that I saw. And I think at the time I saw the video, I'd say at 2 a.m. Sydney time, because someone gave me a tip about it, and someone took a screenshot. And there's an image of one of the production areas, and there's a box. And I looked at the box, and it looked to me at 2 a.m. as 22nd September 2020. And I'm thinking, well, if it's a 2020 box, and here we are in March 2021, this video wasn't shot recently, and the video is just completely redundant. Well, a whole bunch of other people like Craig Kempke looked at the image, goes, that's not 2020, that's 2010. So it's like, well, and again, people may look at the handwriting and say it's either 2010 or 2020, but why would the Perth Mint put out a video on a night of Good Friday with a 63-second propaganda video about production in the Perth Mint? And it basically just provided no confidence. I mean, I have to say, the last 2.5 weeks has been an absolute catastrophe for the Perth Mint when it comes to public relations. I mean, Richard Hayes has had a very deliberate strategy, which is using the mainstream press in Australia. None of these journalists and producers have any idea about the gold and silver market. They don't know which questions to ask. Because the Perth Mint is seen as a reputable institution in Australia, they treat him with reverence and respect. There's no tough questions. There's no relevant questions. And these have been soft propaganda pieces. But the reason why he hasn't been able to control his customers and control the market is because typically gold and silver investors in Australia don't go to the mainstream media to actually get information about the market. They come to Rotorua. They go to Arcadia Economics. They come to my channel in the interest of the people, or they'll go to TF Metals Report or Dunnigan Kaiser, Liberty and Finance. They go Gold Palisade Radio. This is where they're getting their information from. And the alternative media is screaming, and they've been particularly since the early February. The market's rigged. There is something wrong with this. And so his whole media campaign has been, every time he speaks like I think you're right. I mean, he's a banker. He speaks in the same way that Jeff Curry talks about, which is, that these Reddit people are trying to, they're trying to squeeze the market like the Hunt brothers, as opposed to, for example, Andy Schectman. Andy Schectman is actually in the business of selling product, and he speaks highly of his customers, and he actually speaks highly of the product. And Richard Hayes is not doing that. So the interviews have not addressed the concerns of the market. It's actually made things worse. They put out these bizarre videos on the night of Good Friday, which inspired no confidence. And then this past weekend on Easter Sunday, the Sky News here in Australia put out a 6-minute, 44-second video of an interview with Richard Hayes. And again, complete propaganda and misdirection. It doesn't actually get to the real substance of the issue. And the reality is that Perth Mint customers, they're not looking at this stuff anyway. They're coming to Bix Weir, and Bix Weir saying this guy's a Rothschild banker, and that you need to pull your metal out straight away and actually get physical. So if the intention of the campaign was to calm the market and actually keep people in these synthetic products, it has been like a complete failure. And obviously we had a 4-day long weekend. So with Monday in Australia, it's a public holiday. It's called Easter Monday. And so the market in Australia started on Tuesday, yesterday, and here I am in Australia on Wednesday. And there is an absolute stampede. And I think we spoke just before we hopped on camera. There's a revolution in the silver market, particularly in Australia. Once customers understand that they actually have no legal property rights to any physical or a bar or coin, and they want that legal ownership, they're never going back to a synthetic product. So what we're seeing is the great awakening in the silver market, particularly in Australia, and it's now starting to spread across the world. I'm getting emails from the US and Canada and the UK, Germany, Argentina. People around the world are now waking up to, what are these synthetic products? Why is it important for their own personal financial protection to have physical ownership? But also, how does the retail arm of the market, if we all stood for physical delivery, how does that actually impact COMEX? I think people are waking up to that story, and I know that in this country, and also not just about the Perth Mint. I mean, I have friends working in private dealerships who provide these synthetic products. And they just have said, I mean, one dealership said that in basically 9 days of trading, which was last week and the week before, a ton of synthetic silver was dumped, and we're talking maybe 200, 250 customers, and some of them are small, some of them are large. And when this person told me that a ton of this stuff has been dumped in 9 days of trading, well, how does that compare to what you normally do? Hardly anyone calls up and says, I want physical. And now that everyone's awake to this and people are hearing me and you and Chris Marcus and a whole bunch of other people talk about this stuff, there's no going back. There's no going back in Australia, at least. And I think that through this conversation, and I've just done a conversation with Craig Kempkin and Tom Bodrick at Palisade Gold Radio, these conversations are going to drive the message right across the world, and we're going to change the market from the bottom up. And how you do it is by standing for physical delivery and getting out of these synthetic products. And I have to credit Craig Kempke. He wrote an article for Sprott Money on the 2nd of February, and he said, you're going to see problems not at COMEX or London, you're going to see it in Perth, Montreal, and Zurich. And lo and behold, the first crisis point in this silver squeeze movement is Perth. And it's getting worse by the day.
I would say, from my take, I've been jumping into this like a week. From what I can tell from diving into some of the Perth documents, I did find their inventories. It hadn't been updated since October of 2020, but the inventories for pooled allocated, 6.7 million. They listed out all the bars. That's potentially had some Chinese bars in it, but unknown. We hear there's Chinese bars being delivered now. But the key, one of the keys, I would assume that Macquarie is their financial rigor on the banking side. And the reason I assume that is twofold. One of the managing directors is Liam Twigger. Liam Twigger is from Macquarie and is on the board at Perth Mint on Gold Corp. So his job at Macquarie was setting up the synthetic products, exactly what you're talking about. Macquarie is and has been for the last 2 months one of the delivery agents on the COMEX. And in the last 2 months, they delivered about 600 contracts each month, which gives you 3 million ounces for a total of a little over 6 million ounces, 6.2. If they are mobilizing, as many people think, that the Perth Mint is the place people went to get 1,000-ounce bars to deliver on the COMEX. If that is happening, it looks like they'll soon be out of the 1,000-ounce bars that are supposed to be held in the pooled allocated accounts. That would explain why everybody's seeing a delay is, oh, Jesus, we had a problem at the COMEX. We had to make delivery of 1,000-ounce bars. Who's got them? They call the syndicate. Perth Mint, Richard Hayes says, hey, I got them. They're in my pooled allocated account. You can use this. Nobody comes in and takes delivery. And then once people get a sniff that their pooled silver might not be there, they start coming in and they change the rules, just like all the bankers always do. Now you can't get your silver in 10 days anymore. It's 10 days for us to find how to spell the shipping company that we have to hire. The insanity of, one, they're going to change the rules. Number two, they're going to mobilize silver from where they can get it. And it's the collusion. And this is illegal in America, probably in Australia too. You can get charged with RICO charges, just like JP Morgan got charged with RICO charges. RICO charges is a conspiracy to commit crimes. If Perth Mint is conspiring with Macquarie to mobilize already allocated pooled accounts, I would say that is more than just an accounting shell game. That's fraud. And I wouldn't be satisfied if Mr. Hayes went into their inventory and took a camera and said, okay, here's all our silver bars. We need to know where those bars, who has ownership of those bars, how many claims are on each one of those bars. It's like going into Fort Knox and saying, here's all the gold. Well, we don't know if that gold's been swapped out on a swap arrangement or what is going on. We have to know what's in the metal, where the metal is, and who owns it, and who's got title to it, and is it being used in any of these financial shenanigans. I think all of the above is happening at the Perth Mint. If you are a customer of the Perth Mint and you have these allocated accounts and they say it's going to take time, demand your money back right away and then go buy your silver somewhere else. That's the key. Don't wait for them. You can't wait for them because that plays into their hand. If you go buy from somebody who does have the metal available, that takes the metal away from them that they're going to try to scramble around to get. That's my take. I think what's going on, and we've seen it at Kitco and the Royal Canadian Bank. I've seen it at the U.S. Treasury. I don't think they're doing it anymore, but they were. And all these refineries and minting companies that have unallocated accounts, that's all their inventory for making the metals. When they run out of the inventory to make the metals, all those unallocated accounts are naked because there is no inventory. And that's Correct. What I was screaming about years ago. So yes, it's a gigantic shell game, cluster blank, but we have to stay on them. We have to keep screaming about it, especially, there's probably hundreds of millions of dollars worth of unallocated, allocated, and pool allocated money sitting in the Perth Mint with no metal attached to it. You need to get that money out and then redeploy it somewhere where they have the real metal that they'll give to you.
Yeah. No, the thing is that, so I don't think it's $100 million. It's more than $1 billion. I'll make a couple of observations, Bix. The first one is, so I've heard you over the last week talk about Macquarie Bank and the linkages. Now, that is fascinating. To be honest, I haven't looked into that angle. No, there's been zero reporting about any financial relationship between Macquarie Bank, the Perth Mint, and Comex. So obviously there are. I mean,
there he is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The thing is, okay.
That's not proof. That's not proof.
Well, yeah. No, but okay. So here's the thing. So what I know about Perth is that the establishment is a small tight club, and these people move around in sort of deck chairs. So yeah. So you do have someone from Macquarie Bank now on the board of Gold Corporation, which is the Perth Mint. But does that mean that there's a financial relationship linked to the Comex? I mean that's not definitive proof. So, but I'm sure there'll be Australians now digging into that question to see what they can come up with. But where I sort of came into this, particularly around the Perth Mint, was back in 2018. I was focused on the Reserve Bank of Australia. So our central bank has 80 tons of gold. It's all in the Bank of England. And I've been on a bit of a mission because I wanted it actually back in Australia. So I found in 2018 in the balance sheet, in the annual report of the RBA, that they were leasing 11 tons of gold. And I did a show, and people can sort of look it up. John Adams, 11 tons of gold. They can find that video. And I just asked the question: well, why would you lease gold, and who has it? And from that, there was a huge amount of interest in this particular sort of angle, and the Reserve Bank of Australia got smashed with correspondence and phone calls, and because before then there was no information on the RBA website about its gold position. So they actually created a web page, and they actually provided some information about its gold holdings, the value of the gold holdings, and its leasing activities. But then they said, well, the counterparty is of these 11 tons is completely confidential. And we're not going to tell you who it is. And I, went back and forth with the RBA. We had some emails, but basically they said, not going to, we're not going to tell you. Fast forward to February of 2019. So back in 2012-13, I was working as an economic advisor in federal parliament for a particular senator. His name's Arthur Sinodinos. He's actually Australia's ambassador to the United States at the moment. So, but I had the chance to work for him for about 18 months. And through that process, I got to learn how Parliament works and build a number of strong relationships across Parliament. And so I told a number of parliamentarians who sit on the House of Representatives Economics Committee, hey, why don't you actually ask some questions of the RBA about gold and gold leasing and see what they say? So I drafted some questions, and the politicians did actually ask some questions of the Reserve Bank of Australia. And one of the answers that they said, and I was just gobsmacked with this, is they said, well, when we lease the gold from the Bank of England, the gold physically does not move. Now, initially I said, well, how would you know? So up until that point, February of 2019, there had only ever been one audit of Australia's gold, and that was in 2013. And they still refused to release the audit report. So I'm thinking to myself, well, if the gold's been sitting in the Bank of England for more than 20 years, and you've only ever been in the vault once, and the audit was a complete sham of an audit, how do you know if the Bank of England is moving the gold or not? So initially I thought, well, that's just a bullshit answer. You don't know if the gold is moving or not. But then I thought to myself, well, assume that what they're saying is true, that the gold does not move. Now, when I did actually a show about this 11 tons, I played a clip of a documentary involving Eric Sprott and a gold analyst called Frank van der Rosa. I'm sure you've heard of the name and you've come across Frank. So Frank and Eric basically were looking at the demand for gold and looking at how much the mining sector could deliver on an annual basis. And they said that, well, there's a clear deficit. So in that clip of Frank van der Rosa saying there's what he called an official sector supply. And this is secret gold leased from the Bank of England to the bullion banks in London, sent to Switzerland, melted down, refined, and then sold to Indian, Russian, and Chinese customers who want the gold. And this was a way for Western central banks to suppress it was a way for them to suppress the price. So that's how I was initially thinking about it. But then I thought to myself, well, okay, so Eric Sprott says the gold moves. The RBA says the gold doesn't move. But let's assume what the RBA is saying is true. The gold doesn't move. Well, who would borrow gold that doesn't move, that's sitting in the Bank of England? Well, in 2019, by about July, there was the second audit of the RBA gold. And one of my contacts actually put in a Freedom of Information request. And from that process, a range of documents were released. And I think, Bix, in the last week, I've sent you one of these documents. And there's an email between two RBA officials that talk about gold. And in the email, they say that the 11 tons, which I think is about 357,000 ounces, it's been leased to Gold Corporation, which is the Perth Mint. And I'm thinking to myself, well, hang on, you've got a refiner / manufacturer / retailer borrowing gold from the central bank, and the gold sitting in the Bank of England, and the RBA tells Parliament when we lease, the gold physically does not move. Well, on what commercial basis will the Perth Mint borrow gold from in a foreign vault that does not move? The only explanation that I can come up with is that they're using it to back their synthetic products. So when the accountant, Australians have been naive to this point. So they go on the Perth Mint website, they look at these products, and the Perth Mint says it's backed 100%. And Australians think, well, this is a government institution, the government won't lie to us. If they say it's 100% backed, we're just going to trust them. And they say, look, we're audited on a regular basis, all of this sort of stuff. So now, when it comes to this 100% backing, my contention is that, so do they have some gold and some silver? I do believe that they do. Do they have all of it? I don't believe that. Look, I don't think they have all of it. I think what they're doing is when the accountants or the auditors walk in and say, okay, what's your exposure on these products? And they could say, well, our exposure is 100 tons of gold. Well, where's the 100 tons? And they may say, well, we have, I don't know, we may have 80 tons here in Western Australia in warehouses or vaults, etc. But we're also we actually have legal ownership of other gold or other silver through these leasing arrangements. And that's how I think they're coming up with getting the tick from the auditor. They're using these rehypothecated leasing arrangements in order to pass the audit. Now, if you look at the Gold Corporation annual report for 2020, it says that as of 30 June 2020, if you look at the balance sheet, there's a line item called precious metal borrowings, precious metal borrowings interest bearing. And that figure for 30 June 2020, which is the end of our financial year, it's $1.7 billion. Now, the reason why this particular item is important is when they say interest bearing, well, that is these lease agreements. So this interest that the Perth Mint pays when they borrow gold, it's based on the leasing fees. And so they've borrowed. Now, a part of that $1.7 billion is the 11 tons of gold from the RBA. What is the other metal they've borrowed? I don't know. But and I've said this on multiple occasions. They're running a fractional reserve synthetic program. That's why they borrowed 11 tons of gold from the RBA. Some people in the Australian market have said that they were using a fractional reserve system not for unallocated and pool allocated, but for the ETF. And they sold the ETF to Goldman Sachs in December of 2020. Now, again, there's a lot of opportunity to speculate because they're not transparent. And Richard Hayes won't go on the record and actually answer some of these questions. And the first question, if he came on my channel, for example, came on your channel, first question is, why did you borrow 11 tons of gold from the Bank of England or from the RBA that's sitting in the Bank of England that physically does not move? What was the commercial reason for that? And I don't, like, I had someone who's been in the industry for more than a decade speak to me on the phone in the last fortnight, and she basically said to me, she said, don't quote me, but I think what you're saying is correct. They're running a fractional reserve synthetic program, but they can't admit it to the market. And that's why they're playing all these sort of little games to basically throw people off, to throw people off the scent. Well, in 2021, I mean, look, the media landscape is completely different to say 2020 in terms of 2010, 2011. So when you were focusing on the Perth Mint a decade ago, I mean, we did have the internet, we did have the emergence of social media, but now that people have moved to Twitter and Telegram and Facebook and YouTube on a critical mass, The games that they were playing with you 10 years ago of trying to come up with in terms of BS answers and to try to sort of avoid controversy. That's not happening this year, and there's too many Australian investors who are awake to being lied to by governments, by media, and I think the Epstein scandal woke a lot of people up and saying, well, if Epstein could operate in America for 15 years and Bill Clinton was involved and a whole bunch of other people were involved, well, what else are they trying to hide? And so that's where I think there's, people call the Great Reset. I mean, there's definitely been a great awakening. A lot of millions of people around the world are awake now to corruption, to conspiracy. Some conspiracies that are out there that I think are too far-fetched and you can't prove, but on this issue of market manipulation in an international syndicate, the evidence is abundantly clear. And again, if Richard Hayes wants to prove that I'm wrong or that Bix Weir is wrong, all he has to do is actually give an interview with someone credible, take tough questions, and give straightforward answers. And he hasn't been transparent.
Be truthful in those answers. That's
absolutely
a big problem that the Perth Mint always had. They try to dance around. I remember talking about this guy, Braun, I don't even remember his name, and John Nadler was in there, and I'm like, all you guys got to do is tell the truth. That's all we're looking for. We're not looking to bust you for anything you did bad. We would rather have the truth. Just tell us what's going on, because clearly there are things going on behind the scenes that you can shuffle under the rug all you want. The CFTC shuffled the JP Morgan and Friends market rigging operation. They had 3 investigations where they're sitting on JP Morgan's desk. JP Morgan's running all their computer programs, rigging the market, and the CFTC investigators saw nothing. It took 9 years later for the DOJ to come in and say, oh, by the way, you're getting fined $982 million, and there's 4 traders who are still up on RICO charges. They should have taken JP Morgan down, but the ramifications of that's what I want to talk about right now. If you are right, and I know you're right, and if the Perth Mint admits it, the U.S. Mint admits what they do, the U.S. Fed admits what they do with gold and silver, Kitco admits what they do, the Royal Bank of Canada, if everybody admitted it, and we had free trading of silver, what would happen to the world? We would see some of the largest banks in the world go down that are too big to fail. We would see the complete destruction of everything. That's their argument on the regulator side. We are here to save the world. We're not trying to harm the world. And yet it goes on year after year after year for the last 100 years. It is not doing the world any good anymore. We need to remove these people.
Well, yes. So what I would say on that is that, so if this global debt bubble, which is north of, I'm pretty sure it's north of, I think, $280 trillion. If that was to blow up, we would have the biggest depression in the history of humanity.
Would we though?
It would be a very tough event.
I don't think it would. Well, you know why? What would happen? It would get rid of all the debt. It would get rid of all the electronic assets too, obviously. But our biggest problem in the world right now is that debt bubble. So you wouldn't have a depression. You would have a destruction and a revamp of something new. There'd be no depression. It would be over.
Well, yes. So what? Okay. So there are a couple of theories. Now, some people say that if gold and silver, if it was repriced, well, then you could restore balance to the monetary system with the current debt bubble. But on the other hand, if by repricing gold and silver, it leads to systemic failures of these, what the IMF call these globally systemically important banks, well, what's going to happen then is these defaults leads to a shrinkage of the debt. And then you get contagion, and then you get, a financial crisis like like the world's never seen before. But for millions, potentially billions of people, it will be the greatest economic hardship in the history of the world. But what's on the other side of that is it's freedom. We would liberate the world not just from the debt, we would liberate the world from the power structure. And the power structure is the funny thing is that there's a lot of people, particularly I notice that look on social media in America, they're very awake to corruption in Washington D.C. And the swamp and how these various agencies work. But what people don't understand is how is Washington being financed? It's being financed through debt, and it's being financed through the suppression of these metals. So when I look at it, so I know that look, I actually downloaded the song "Free Markets." I really like that song, by the way. But some people come at this, okay, I'm going to protect my wealth. We're going to actually have a free economy. But no, but when you think about this in political terms, you're liberating, humanity from this corrupt power structure, and we're going to have a new global leadership in terms of the other side, because the current leadership won't survive that sort of economic crisis, because their credibility will just be shot with the billions of people who are still asleep. So that's what I think is that is on the end of it. But I do think we're getting closer. I mean, a lot of us and people who have come into the Australian, like in the gold and silver market in Australia over the last couple of years. I mean, I get questions. I was in Adelaide last week, and I was getting questions about the price. And I said, don't look at the price, because the price is manipulated. We all know that it's rigged at COMEX. So how do you understand where this market is going? You've got to track what's happening with the physical ounces of gold and silver. Where is it moving, in what quantity, and why? And that gives you some information about, is the market sort of stable, or is it becoming unstable? And I wrote an article on my website called the silver market is fast approaching breaking point. And I clearly sort of outlined that in February, there was evidence of stress in the physical market, whether it was in the retail market, premiums on 1,000 ounce bars, changes to legal documentations like with SLV, leasing rates in London for borrowing gold and silver were going through the roof, and obviously what's happening at COMEX. And COMEX is fascinating. So the only thing I look at when it comes to the market is the warehouse, what's happening with the warehouse data, because that's what's tracking, what supposedly is supposed to be happening with these physical ounces. And all I can now, I'm not sure if I can trust the data, but assuming the data is accurate, all we can glean is the inventory for silver peaked on the 2nd of February at 399.7 million troy ounces, and since then we've had 30 million ounces leave the vaults. Now we may not have much movement in the warehouse around April, if your audience is not aware, March 2021 was the second biggest delivery month in the history of the market, behind July 2020, and then we get into May. And now I've spoken to a few people, and there are rumors that it's anywhere between 65 million ounces north of 100 million ounces, and the record for July 2020 was, I think, 86.4 million ounces. So May could be the biggest delivery month in the history of the market. And what we know is they're struggling to come up with it. And so if we see that volume in May, we will see more metal leave the registered category at COMEX. And then the question is, at what point do they? So because people say, well, if silver is leaving the vault or the warehouse, how does that influence the price? Well, it's what happened with July last year. The first 2 weeks of July, the price does nothing. And then by mid-July, they run into problems because they don't have enough physical silver to meet the deliveries. And the price at the time was around $17.95 US an ounce. So from mid-July to the end of the first week of August, 3 weeks, the price runs 60% from $17.95 up to $29. And when the price went up to $29, that encouraged a whole bunch of people holding physical to sell. They were able to get that silver, or silver at the time, and they meet their delivery obligation. So there will be a point in which that they just don't have enough silver to meet the COMEX delivery contracts, and then the price will run. But what we don't know is when that point will come. We don't know how much the price will run. And the other flip side is that as the price runs, you do get sellers, but you also get a lot more buyers because people are jumping on that momentum trade. And so that's what I think the exciting thing is. I think when I look at the physical market, it's definitely moving in the right direction in terms of the COMEX data. And then when you interview Inti Sheckman, or when Andy goes on with Dunnigan Kaiser or Chris Marcus, I listen to what Andy has to say for the North American market, and I've got a feel for what's happening here in Australia. There's clearly problems in the physical market, and that's why Craig Hemke said, well, the first flashpoint's not going to be at COMEX or London. It's going to be Perth, Zurich, or Montreal. And here we are at the beginning of April, and Perth is in an absolute crisis. And let me just touch on these Chinese bars. Now, it's actually a fascinating story. I get a message yesterday, 24 hours ago, and someone had an unallocated position, and he went to allocated 17,000 ounces. He goes, okay, I'll take 17 1,000 ounce bars. So they had them, but they said we have 2 Perth Mint 1,000 ounce bars, and the rest of them are these Chinese bars that are from a LBMA accredited refiner in China.
Although
now
the LBMA added so many new accredited refining companies just recently, I was shocked that like anybody who wanted to call themselves a mining company could qualify as a LBMA good quality bar producer.
Yes. Now the funny thing is, I have spoken to the head of a refiner in Australia who is LBMA accredited, and what they said to me is the LBMA actually does a serious job about approving the accreditation. And when it comes to the auditing, the audits are very expensive and they are very rigorous. So now, I've never been through an LBMA audit. I've never actually sought LBMA accreditation, but someone who has told me point blank, they don't mess around. These are serious processes that the LBMA run. Now, again, is that real? Is that legit? Was I fed, misinformation? In terms of misinformation, I'm not sure. But all I can say is someone who's went through that process says that it is rigorous. Now, when it comes to this specific refiner, and I can't pronounce it, but I know that you pronounced it in your show earlier today. Before I put out my tweet yesterday, I did make a few phone calls. I have been told that these specific bars have been floating around Australia for the last probably 12, 18 months. There have been so far no problems with the bars in terms of their integrity. And I know that you said in your show, you can't for us anything out of China. They have to be melted down and they have to be recasted. Well, I mean, that hasn't been happening. But so far, no one has made any allegations of fraud in terms of these bars. But this investor yesterday, when he was told you must take 15 1,000 ounce Chinese bars, he said, okay, I'll take them and I'll pay the fabrication cost, which is 1,000 Australian dollars per bar. Now, I put out that tweet and I basically said, well, because it's significant from twofold. One is the Perth Mint never communicated that their pool allocated product was backed by Chinese bars. But the other thing is that it clearly showed that they've run out of their own product. And I think that's, before I put out the tweet, I called up David Morgan and I said, well, David, what does this say to you? He goes, well, they clearly have a huge supply problem if they can't provide Perth Mint product to their own clients. So that's why I thought it was significant. Then yesterday afternoon, I get someone reaching out, and I called someone up who's in Victoria. His wife actually saw my tweet, and she told this person who I spoke to about this scandal. So and this person had unallocated 6,000 ounces, and he paid $1,000 per bar, and he went to allocated. Now, when he went to allocated, he never asked what he was going to get. He just assumed it was going to be Perth Mint. So, but when he saw my tweet, he called them up yesterday afternoon and said, well, a couple of weeks ago, I paid $6,000 to get these 1,000 ounce bars. Can you just tell me who the refiner is? And they said, these bars, these are Chinese bars. And so this person just hit the roof and said, because Bix, in the Australian market, Perth Mint is a little bit pricey when it comes to actually buying, fabricating, and then in terms of storage. They are more expensive to other players in the market, but a lot of Australians are willing to pay that extra cost for the Perth Mint because of the Perth Mint reputation, the quality and the standard of their products. So when someone is paying, and I should say, and I don't know if you're aware of this, November last year, the Perth Mint jacked up their fabrication cost. So on a 1 kilo gold bar, they increased their fabrication cost by 500%. And on these, 400%. And on these 1,000 ounce bars, they increased their fabrication cost by 500%. And I was just saying to Craig Kemp this morning, this seems to me the similar tactic that they use at Comex in terms of raising margin requirements, where they raise fabrication requirements And so,
They're not
but
fabricating. They're not fabricating these Chinese bars.
no,
There's
because
no
they've already
fabrication for
fabricated.
them.
Exactly. So they're already been fabricated. But so this guy said, I'm doing business with you because I want a Perth Mint bar. I don't want these Chinese bars. And so now, what well, after I spoke to him, I'll come back to him in a second. But I did speak to another friend of mine who also converted 1,000 ounce bars from unallocated to physical, or to allocated. And I called him up last night and I said, well, what refiner did you get? And he goes, I don't know. I never asked. I just assume it's going to be Perth Mint. Now, one thing I told my friend, I said, go check the legal documentation, because I think the promise to deliver is not a Perth Mint product. It's an LBMA good delivery bar. So as long as the Perth Mint says it has the LBMA stamp of approval, we have met our contractual obligation. But unfortunately, Australian investors don't understand how that works, and they just assume if they're standing for delivery, they're going to get a Perth Mint product as opposed to an LBMA accredited bar. And obviously there's a lot of skepticism in Australia about the quality of what's coming out of China. And I know that you obviously expressed that view. So just going back to this guy, just to wrap up, he basically jumped up and down and said that he wouldn't accept it. He goes, if you send me these bars, because he's not just going to allocate, he goes, you're going to freight it across the country to Victoria. And he said, well, if you send them to me, I'm literally going to drive to Western Australia and give them back to you, because I'm not going to accept these. And he's, threatened legal action, jumped up and down on the phone. And so to make him happy, they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take 6 1,000 Perth bars from someone else. We're going to give them to you. And these Chinese bars, we'll give them to someone else. Now, and obviously the Perth Mint didn't want anyone to know that, but when I got told that, I put out on Twitter, and now everyone's blowing up. But no, the key scandal over the last 3 weeks is people. Now there have been a whole host of people who have got a cash redemption, gone to another dealership, like the dealership I work for, or other dealership, and have got physical elsewhere. But those who paid the fabrication costs and went to allocated, I think the scandal this week is they're going to realize they didn't get a Perth Mint product. Now, some have not. And those who haven't, and they got a foreign bar, they're going to learn that this week, and they're going to be absolutely livid because the Perth Mint never told them up front, we're going to give you a Chinese bar.
Well, and it gets to, I mean, a while back, Morgan Stanley got busted for charging customers storage fees for metal that they had on account there, but they never had the metal. So they're charging them storage fees for not storing anything, and they got busted for that. It sounds like the Perth Mint is in a fairly similar situation where they're charging fabrication fees where they're not doing any fabricating on these Chinese bars. So
absolutely. But I was going to say that Bix, the other thing is that there are some Australians who would say, okay, if I'm going to pay $1,000, give me a Perth Mint product. I mean, but if you're going to, because here's the thing, I mean, it's probably because of labor costs, it's more expensive to fabricate in Australia versus China. But if what's the real cost of fabricating in China? It's not $1,000 Australian. It's probably a fraction of that. So it's like, well, why am I paying $1,000 for a Chinese bar? Because even if it was fabricated, it doesn't cost the Perth Mint or the Chinese refiner $1,000 Australian to actually do the process. So there's massive gouging that's happening in terms of Australian retail customers. And again, as I continue to tweet about this, and if people want to find out more information by the minute, I'm putting out information by the hour as it comes to me on Twitter, and people are just blown away as to, well, what the hell's really going on. But again, Richard Hayes won't be transparent. He won't be honest. He won't take tough questions. He just tries to hide behind these propaganda pieces. And he has lost the confidence of his customers.
And the customers, it gets back to the keyboard cowboys. When the Reddit guys went after GameStop, it wasn't because they felt like it. It wasn't a gang thing. Hey, let's all get together and we can do this. It was because the hedge funds were illegally shorting it well over the total float of the company. They saw an area that was exposed by the banking cabal. They attacked it, and they did very well for the most part if they got out. Now we're seeing another area exposed by the banking cabal, cheating, lying, stealing, where they are absolutely in trouble. There is not enough metal to go around. There's not enough silver to go around. They've been lying for so many years. The least metal, I wouldn't be surprised if 99% of all the ETF metal had some kind of leases, swaps, some kind of financial obligations on them. Where, I mean, Jeff Curry of Goldman Sachs, one of the authorized participants of SLV, said all the ETF metal is the shorts on the COMEX. Well, if that is true, and then let's just say Goldman Sachs is also leasing that metal from somebody else, that's like 3 shorts on one SLV contract that's supposed to be standalone according to the prospectus. This is pure fraud by these banking cabal. The DOJ knows about it, the SEC knows about it, and the CFTC knows about it. They refuse to do anything about it. That means they're colluding with the banks, with the bullion refiners, and it's all us, keyboard cowboys who are going to have to take these guys down. And if it takes 1 million of us, everybody going to the retail shop and buying a couple bags of silver and taking it home with us, then so be it. We're tired of their bullshit. We're tired of their lies. We're tired of their trying to say, oh, you don't know what you're doing because you don't work in our business. Well, your business is corrupt. Your business is fraud. That's the business of the retailers, the central bankers, the bullion banks. Even the large mining companies are in on it, believe it or not. It is unbelievable how people within an industry refuse to stand up for that industry. And that's what I'm pissed off about. And that's what needs to stop. I thank God you're down there in Australia. Keep on it. Stay on it. Rip into these guys until they admit they're doing wrong. Not so they tell the last lie. Let's make them admit it. Let's get what's his name? Richard Hayes. Let's get him out of there. Let's get a Rothschild banker out as the head guy at the Perth Mint. Let's get someone in there who cares about the industry. That's my take.
Totally. Well, I mean, the thing is that it's interesting. Certain people have sent because so when you look at the Western Australian Parliament, the relevant minister who's actually in charge of the Perth Mint, who has accountability to the state parliament, is actually the premier. So the leader of the state. He's actually the overseer in Parliament of the Perth Mint. So I definitely know that some Australians have written directly to Mark McGowan and actually said there's a crisis of confidence at the Perth Mint. The Parliament now needs to intervene. And now it's only been a few people, but I think that the more we talk about this on YouTube and social media, and the more Australians waking up to this, who knows? Maybe there can be action where parliaments in Western Australia is actually mobilised to bring confidence back into the market. And look, I've had some correspondence with one media organisation who was initially they said, oh, I won't talk to you, or we're looking into this. And I said, would you be open if I send you some information as background notes? And they said, sure. And I sent them a few emails, and I said in one of the emails, Richard Hayes can restore confidence to the market just by being transparent, and yet he refuses to do so. And the fact that he won't raises more questions and suspicions as to what is really going on. And because there's no clear answers, well, here's the thing, there's no clear answers, but the answers he gives is completely inconsistent with the experience that his customers are facing when they actually call up the Perth Mint. And so because there is such a disconnect between his public comments and customer experience, again, people are not just buying the BS, and word of mouth is spreading across the country. So it's not just me talking about it and YouTube and social media. People are calling up their friends and family and saying, hey, do you have product for the Perth Mint? Do you know what you've got? Are you aware of this scandal? And the word's spreading. And I should say, so 1 a.m. in Sydney, it was 11 p.m. in Perth. So just in the last 12 hours, I'm on the phone with someone in Perth. 2 weeks ago, he goes to the Perth Mint, and he and his wife, they review their allocated gold and silver. So they got taken down, and they had a look, and they basically, everything was fine in terms of the inventory statement and what was there. But then he gets chatting with the Perth Mint and staff employee who took him down to the vault, and she blurted out once they started talking about silver market. Of course, the silver market is manipulated. That's the quote, and it's like, well, the establishment's never supposed to acknowledge that. So obviously, you've been fighting these guys for a decade. Ted Butler's been fighting with these guys for 35 years, and the official position is they're not supposed to acknowledge it. Well, now I'll get someone calling me on the phone in the middle of the night here in Australia saying there's effectively renegades inside the Perth Mint who know what the game is and now are telling clients it's a rigged market and we're part of the rigging. It's just, look, I mean, that was just extraordinary. And this person who got told this, he was just in shock. He goes, I can't believe they actually told me, because they're not supposed to acknowledge it. And not only was he shocked, because he's been doing this for a decade. His wife, who's more, who's not clued in about precious metals, she was shocked as well. It's going, but hang on, this is one of the premier mints in the world, and their staff are telling clients now the market's rigged. Well, look, I mean, it's kind of like the JFK assassination. We're not supposed to talk about it, but now in the last 2 weeks, you get renegades inside the Perth Mint now admitting what's going on. Look, it's just stunning what's going on. And I mean, this stuff's moving day by day, hour by hour. And again, I think there's a new silver revolution. It's been happening for 2.5 weeks, particularly here in Australia. Once you go from synthetic to physical, you're never going back. A permanent structural change to the market. And all this is going to do is just place more and more pressure on mints, on banks, on COMEX, on LBMA, on London, and it's going to blow up. Does it blow up in May with 100 million ounces standing at COMEX? Maybe, maybe not. But if it doesn't blow up in May, dare I say, I think July is going to be it.
I would say one last thing. My last thought is, don't forget who is harmed the most by the manipulation, the price suppression. It is the countries that are mining these precious metals out of their ground. Australia is a huge mining country. Western Australia has probably the biggest gold mines around, and there's coal, and there's all kinds of things that the bankers think, oh, this is so great. We can rig the market, keep these prices low, so we can pretend there's no inflation. Look at Mexico, who's sold more silver than any other country, and yet the poverty level is gigantic in Mexico. It shouldn't be that way. These bureaucrats and the bankers and the people at the Mint who are purposefully suppressing the price of silver are hurting their own country. Their own countrymen are suffering. How rich would Australia be if there was a fair market value of gold and silver placed on that product that's coming out of Australia? It would be one of the richest countries in the world because there's so much there. And yet there's poverty all over the place, just like South America, poverty all over the place. This needs to stop. The people need to stand up and say, no more. Get rid of these bankers, throw them in jail because they're breaking the law. Even if they change the laws, they're breaking it. They're destroying the lives of people who are in the industry and the communities that are supported by that industry. So many poor countries with huge mining facilities all around because the price is suppressed, it is screwing with these countries and these people within the countries, and it's the people who take the worst brunt of it, is my take.
You know what, Bix, what you just said is what I figured out 18 months ago. Australia is controlled by people engaged in high treason against the country. And whether it's Australia, whether it's Mexico, whether it's South America, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, but that book is all about rigging commodity markets and then using the force of the American military and the intelligence community to make sure no one stops the scheme. So I mean, look, again, I mean, this is very deep. It's not just banks, it's just not mints, it's governments, it's intelligence services, it's military. And John Perkins in that book, I haven't read the whole book, I've read elements of the book, but he gives a whole different complexion to what we're dealing with relative to what you sort of hear on some of these YouTube channels. But no, we're talking about a global syndicate. And I have to say, because look, you said something this morning that in your video that really caught my attention, and you said that there's the Rothschilds, but then there's people behind the Rothschilds. Now, to be honest, I don't know who those people is. So at some point, maybe I need to come to California, and you can sort of tell me, who is, I mean, I think David Icke says they're reptiles or they're aliens. I mean, who is the real power structure in this world? I'm fascinated to pick your brain on that question.
We'll take that one offline. I do have to wrap this up. Unbelievable conversation. Tell people where to find you, how to follow your work. Definitely get on Twitter. You're on fire on Twitter these days. Tell people how to find you.
Sure. Yeah. So Twitter, Adams Economics. That's my handle. I do have so some people like to use Telegram. I have a Telegram a group, Adams Economics. People can join me there. I have a website, adamseconomics.com. The bullion dealership I work for is Good as Gold Australia. People can, if people are interested in physical silver in Australia, they can come and source gold and silver from us. And then the long-standing YouTube channel that I have it's called In the Interest of the People, with my co-host Martin North. We've done a number of shows recently about silver, and I think some of those videos people will take value from it, particularly the video exposing the synthetic silver scam, because we actually go through the legal differences between allocated, unallocated, pool allocated, and I think that gives a very foundational understanding about what this whole conversation has been about.
Well, thank you so much. And all you Road to Ruta people, follow up on that. We'll hear more from John. Let's get together near the COMEX delivery dates at the end of April into May. It should get really exciting, which is good. And make sure everybody out there, spread the word. That's all we have to do. It's the light of day that will destroy the banking cabal. And all you keyboard cowboys out there, you got these guys by the balls, just like you had the hedge funds by the balls in the GameStop short. Let's keep going after them. It's not going to stop. If May we don't destroy them, we're going to destroy them in July. This is something that has gone on for way too long, and we are going to end it. John, thank you so much for coming on the Road to Ruta, and we will speak very soon.
Thank you, Bix.
All right, take care.